Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sports Voice. Today's a special one because we are going to be rolling for an hour and a half. We apologize, the sports block starting a bit later than usual, but we are very excited to get things rolling because it's a big day in Northwestern sports. We'll get to it in just a bit in depth because we have a lot of time to talk about the details, but Northwestern field hockey national champions. Huge day for Northwestern. I'm Sammy Krimstein. My co-host Claire Connor is here. Kaplan is here. Jonah McClure is here. Pierson Strandquist. It's been a long day, folks. Pierson Strandquist is here, and we are going to have an incredible episode. So, how is everyone doing? We'll get into the sports very quickly, but let's check in. I know it's kind of finals are coming up, papers are happening, right? We're all tired, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is something for more than an hour into the show, and I don't want it to overshadow what Northwestern field hockey has achieved, but brutal game for the Commanders today, doing as well as I can be under those circumstances.
I don't like Matt Eberflus. The Bears are
Amen.
The Bears are bad.
Indeed, they are. I don't know. I mean, the sports is kind of a little bit, but field hockey made me feel a lot better, and it was kind of like a quid pro quo almost. But I can deal with that. I mean, to be expected from the Bears, unfortunately. So, but yeah, Calvin, you get to feel a little bit what it's like to have not
Heartbreaking loss, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a Bears fan, so I think that sort of mood-wise would normally put me a step above everyone else. I have kind of unusual academic circumstances this week. I have a final tomorrow, a final on Tuesday, and a final project due Tuesday, and I leave Wednesday for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And so I'm not coming back. Like, I'm done. It's I don't have to be here for reading week. I'll be home in the warm weather of California. But it's been a crazy week for me.
Yeah.
One thing I feel like we have to call out, I was chatting with them about it earlier, just kind of an awesome moment in the WNUR group me this week. I just feel like we need to recap this, and Sammy, maybe you know what I'm talking about at this point. But,
There are lots of iconic moments.
A lot of iconic moments. But anyhow, Dylan Friedland, one of our awesome friends at the station, was at the Panthers Blackhawks game earlier, like this past week. The Panthers lost, and I think it was Charlie
Go
Jacobs who was taunting him for this in the group me. And Dylan sends a picture of the Stanley Cup and says, "Let me know when Bedard gets one of these." Pierson sends a different picture, 3 Chicago Blackhawks hoisting the Stanley Cup, and Dylan says, "Were you even alive for that first one?" And Pierson's response, which I can show on the video live stream, is it's not going sideways, but it's this picture here.
There we go.
It this way, which is
We love video.
It's pretty iconic. Pierson, maybe you can tell us a bit about this. But Pierson says yes, it was. And Henry Freeman responds, "Aura," and I think that's probably the best response you could have to that.
I agree. I mean, I would say that's probably one of the highlights of my life, honestly. I mean, this was, to give the backstory, this was after the 2015 championship for the Blackhawks, so they're third. And my mom just happens to be friends with, like, one of, like, the city planners who deals with, like, the parades. And so I was in, like, 3rd grade, and so honestly, I wish that I could, like, appreciate it more, and if I could do this now, it'd be so awesome. But we literally got tickets to where we were in front of the media, like, we were where, like, the players' families were, and I think they just assumed that my mom and I were just, like, players' families. But just randomly, like, the Blackhawks girls just came up to me, and they were like, "We should take a picture," and my mom was like, "Yes!" And at the time, I don't think I appreciated the value of that photo, but I think it's one of my favorites of all time, and I think Dylan set me up really well for that comeback. So I appreciate that from him.
He didn't know he was setting you up, but he
didn't
was
know
setting you up.
I had it in my back pocket, but yeah.
Yeah, he didn't know how ready Pierson was for this moment.
I was, yeah. If you want to talk about Blackhawks, I got you there.
Well, to stay on hockey, different type of hockey, field hockey, I think it's time that we get into depth here with the new national champions, Northwestern, taking down St. Joe's today in Ann Arbor. I was actually in Ann Arbor this weekend, just seeing the football game, which we will also be talking about. Unfortunately, that did not go as well. I would have loved to stay for field hockey, but of course had to get back for Sports Voice. So had my little bus, but was watching a little bit of that game, watching a little bit of the Bears game, and Bears game didn't go well. Field hockey went incredible. that was just domination. I think, honestly, that game started going well as soon as the St. Joe's UNC game ended, and St. Joe's ended on top. So I'll start you guys with this. How crucial was it for Northwestern that they didn't have to see UNC, the other really top team in the country, who had been kind of back and forth at that number 1 spot with Northwestern all season long?
I mean, simply what we saw last time I was on SportsVoice, we saw how difficult the Northwestern field hockey schedule was, and we saw recently in the Big Ten tournament how they lost to Michigan in the championship. So I think, though the competition through the first couple rounds of the NCAA field hockey tournament was not as difficult, I feel like if they had to play UNC, I'm not sure how the game would have ended. Though Northwestern has had a very good season, UNC would have put up a good fight, I'd say.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, it's certainly, you cannot be denied that UNC was the matchup that, I mean, Northwestern players obviously could not be looking past any matchup in this NCAA tournament, but maybe fans-wise, that's the eventual culmination of maybe what was expected of this Northwestern season. But the way they came out and played and won 5-0 against St. Joe's with all 5 goals coming in the first 2 quarters of the game, I think that was not only unexpected, it was a fantastic performance, and I think it shows that they would have beaten UNC had they faced off in the title game. I truly believe it. They came out there hot, and they really put together all of the lessons from this season where we've talked about time and time again on this show. The fact that Northwestern, when their loss against Michigan in their close matchups in the tournament, have gone through adversity has helped them build up to a moment like this. Everything has been building up to this national championship, and it's not like this team has coasted by. Maybe they were at the start of the season when they were blowing teams out, but as they got into Big Ten play, as they got into the conference tournament, and eventually as they got into the NCAA tournament, adversity started striking, which made this team tougher and tougher, and then all their scorers just coming together in this game. We had a couple goals, Lauren Hunter with 3 assists. I mean, just a fantastic team performance. And St. Joe's, number 3 in the country, 20-4 record even after the loss. I mean, it's not a UNC game. It's not maybe the game that people expected, but still a fantastic team that Northwestern just dismantled.
Yeah, I echo all that Calvin just said. And I mean, yeah, give credit to St. Joe's. Congrats to them. Big upset for them as well. I mean, you have to give them some credit there. But I agree with Calvin. At the end of the day, we talked about this a lot. I think probably many guests brought this up at SportsVoice about how Northwestern honestly was the best team in the country despite being ranked second pretty much the entire season. And yes, you can argue that like, oh, Michigan didn't get their chance to like double revenge or whatever because they lost to UVA. And you can argue that like UNC has won whatever the last, I think it's 5 in the last 7 tournaments, I think. Northwestern's the only other team who's won in these last 7 years. But yeah, I mean, you could say all of that, but Northwestern clearly, I think, was the best team in this tournament. They played like the best team in this tournament. Against all of their opponents, it just looked like night and day. And it's not like they're playing like the bottom of conferences. They're playing conference champions. They're playing the best teams in the country, and they made all of them, I think, across the board look very weak. And I don't think that's necessarily a testament to the other teams being bad. I just think it's a testament to how good Northwestern is, and it really felt good. Especially after that football game, for them to kind of like lift the school up and lift the spirits up. And I think at 8 p.m., I think they're coming back, and so everyone will be welcoming them there. So I think they deserve a really good reception, which they will get.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how you wouldn't be proud of this team. As somebody, I remember watching the field hockey championship game last year on TV.
Yeah.
Just absolutely heartbreaking. I mean, really exciting for this North Carolina team, which I think shows off some of, the best of field hockey with a young, brand new coach. It just was such an exciting program. But obviously you want Northwestern to pull ahead and win. And so I feel like fans can confidently say that they were the best team in this tournament. They got through very easily against Miami, Ohio at the beginning, which, was a really easy game.
Virginia was tricky.
Virginia was a tough game. They slid past this Virginia team, which beat Michigan, the one, team to overcome Northwestern this season. They escaped what a lot of people thought could be a trap team against UMass Amherst, and so, and then they beat St. Joseph's, which beat North Carolina. Calvin, to your point, I think UNC would have been a tougher matchup for Northwestern. I don't know that you would have seen a 5-0 victory. I think, this is really a defensive-minded team, and so you could see that being, a lower scoring game, maybe something where Northwestern prevails just because of how good their defense is. But, I don't know if it would have been a 5-0 victory, but Northwestern had the most dominant performance in this tournament, absolutely. And I think across the season, there were a lot of people who said, hey, this is such a competitive conference. Northwestern is so far ahead of its opponents' skills, talent, all of this. So I understood the calls to rank Northwestern at number 1. I think the tournament is really the only and the truest test of where everyone belongs. And at the end of the day, there's one winner, and that's the Wildcats. So, very happy.
Yeah, I mean, really exciting stuff. I want to touch on just, like, in all of sports, like, how rare this is to see a team dominate on this level against the kind of competition they played. I mean, losing one game all season long and winning the national championship, right? Because, I mean, I'm thinking, like, basketball, when you talk about what Warriors team was it? The 16-17 Warriors? That
broke the Bulls
record. That broke the Bulls record, right? 73 wins, but they didn't cap it off. And at the end of the day, I think when we're playing sports, that is what matters. Like, you want to win games, as many as you can, but it is all for that grand prize. So, Northwestern, that they lost against Michigan, and I remember in the press conference, Tracy Fuchs, she was concerned, of course, as any coach would be losing, but she had her eyes on the main prize. And they got that main prize, and that's really what matters at the end of the day. So, I mean, just your thoughts on, like, in the grand scheme of sports, like, how difficult is it to do what Northwestern just did? How rare is it to, lose one game in the regular, or really kind of regular season, really postseason in the Big Ten tournament, right? Go undefeated, I guess, in the regular season. Lose in the conference tournament, but then win when it matters most.
I mean, I'd say it's kind of, in field hockey especially, North Carolina in 3 of their national championships in 2018, 2019, and 2022, they went undefeated. However, I feel like even those undefeated teams weren't as talented and as cohesive as this Northwestern team has been this season. I think the biggest testament to their dominance is in the NCAA tournament, not only did they outshoot all of their opponents, but it was an extreme margin. Against Miami of Ohio, 30-8. Against Virginia, 13-6. 10-2 against UMass. And this final game, they only allowed St. John's to have 1 shot on goal, right? That's just incredibly efficient offense, but also incredibly efficient defense as well. And I think even though this is a defensive-minded team, I think a lot of the offensive players, especially the Olympians, right, are the ones who get a lot of the praise and the credit here. But I'd honor, especially Annabelle Scuba is the Big Ten goalkeeper of the year. I think she deserves a lot of credit, but also the defense. You had people stepping up, Lauren Wattis especially, just coming there and just being, like, beasts, honestly. It was really awesome to see, and I'd say I'd have trouble seeing a team being this dominant again, and especially in that category, because historically we just haven't seen this much dominance on both offensively and defensively, and that contrast, I think, will be hard to beat. But, that's not to say they won't win again, and I hope they do next year, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, adding on to what Pierson brought up, I feel like just the depth of this team simply made them so strong. They had 10 players scored 10 points across the season with goals and assists, and I feel like that is just not seen on other teams. Like, obviously they have Ashley Sessa and Maddie Zimmer, who scored both 30-plus points on the year, but just aside from that, other teams may have a great player or a couple great players, but to be able to win games, like in their national championship win today, Ashley Sessa had 2 assists and no goals. Maddie Zimmer had 2 goals, and Ilsa Trump had 2 goals, and Olivia Ben-Cole had 1 goal. Everyone else is able to contribute to the team, regardless of who's having a good day or an off day, and whoever's feeling themselves. They all can contribute because they all have that synergy together.
And I'd also add to that, this is something I didn't even think about bringing up, but for Northwestern in the Big Ten honors, not only was Maddie Zimmer named Player of the Year, Ashley Sessa Offensive Player of the Year, Scuba is Goalkeeper of the Year, and Tracy Fuchs Coach of the Year, but they had 5 Big Ten first teams, 4 of them were unanimous, 2 Big Ten second teams, 3 all Big Ten freshmen, as well as Lane Herbert winning a sportsmanship award. And so, like, across the board in every aspect, on the field, off the field, in every single position, they were just so dominant and so deep. It's just crazy to me. Yes, obviously they didn't win Freshman of the Year and some Defensive Player of the Year, but even those awards, they were all in the top 3 of each of those like voting rankings. And so, I think that's just a testament to, even in the Big Ten, despite losing, and maybe that being the one stand on this season, I'd say it, like you mentioned, Sammy, it doesn't even seem to have phased them, and I don't think it puts a stand on it at all, actually. I think it's more of a testament to Michigan than it is to Northwestern in this case.
Yeah, I mean, Pierson, I think it made them better, the fact that they had to lose a game and kind of bounce back from adversity. And you guys make great points about how there's just so much depth across this team. It's so important to have so many players who can not only score, who can make, but also make effective passes. Of course, also just stellar goalkeeping overall. Just really having a dominant team like that means that even if teams exploit, maybe teams throughout this year have exploited one of the areas of Northwestern's game or multiple areas of the game, you have to exploit all facets of the game and kind of just put on sort of an upset performance in all phases to be able to hope to beat this team. And that's what's so brutal in facing them. And I mean, I think obviously we talked about what it's comparable to in terms of dominance. I mean, yeah, Sammy, you mentioned it. The Warriors 73-9 year didn't finish it off with a championship. It almost feels like Alabama football in a sense, where they're always hanging around, always in the top 2, 3, or 4, either in the national title game or winning the national title game. I mean, Tracy Fuchs, field hockey's, just dominant coach, and she's done a fantastic job with this team, and I think the dynasty continues for many years to come.
And, I also think you can make a comparison within the sport to North Carolina, which I think, previously had been the dynasty team under Karen Shelton, 3 back-to-back national championships, 2 of them in undefeated 23-0 seasons. Yeah. I mean, it is really, really difficult to do. I think in a lot of these, non-Rev women's sports, whether it's Northwestern lacrosse, field hockey, there's a ton of room to outpace the competition when it comes to recruiting, especially when you have coaches who are there at the Olympic level, and who can kind of add that to, their resume and get people to come out to Evanston. But, I think that this is sort of on par with some of what North Carolina has been doing or had been doing from kind of 2018 to 2020. And so whether that's permanent, whether UNC can pick up under Aaron Matson, whether, some other team like a Connecticut or a Princeton, Maryland, Syracuse, also returns back to the dynastic status that they've had in the past. This is a sport where it's possible to do this. And so I think Northwestern is in excellent shape to keep going the way that they are. But it'll be interesting to see how things flow in the years to come.
Well, I like that point, Claire. And as you mentioned it, I kind of thought of that era in the NFL when we were kind of transitioning from the Tom Brady Patriots, and then the Patrick Mahomes Chiefs came along, right? And it kind of has a similar sense in a way, where North Carolina has been the de facto team in field hockey. But now, Northwestern, they won, I guess, 2-3 years back, right? 2021. And then here they are again. And once you win that second, that's when dynasty, that word, starts to ring around in, I think, the national conversation. So for Northwestern, it has that sense. And that is, I think, what we will look for from Northwestern. I think that is now the expectation, that they are going to try and take over that kind of de facto domination spot that North Carolina has held. And I think it's fun for Tracy Fuchs and the team, because while they finished the job this year, like they won, like, I guess you could say, the battle, right? The war of overtaking North Carolina in terms of just like legacy, right? And just getting on top of the mountain, that still goes on. And so, while obviously the celebrations, right, will start in, I guess, 8 minutes down at, I guess, up north at Walter Athletic Center. Really excited to see some of the footage from that. But that's now starting, and that'll go throughout the offseason. But when they hit the regular season, that, like, they won't care about this national championship. It's going to be in the past, rearview mirror, and they're going to be looking forward to try and keep overtaking North Carolina. And I think that is a really fun storyline to watch, and I hope one of these years we do get North Carolina versus Northwestern in the championship game.
I think they wanted it.
I wanted it. I think a lot of people wanted it, and
it's
it didn't
revenge,
happen.
Right? But
right.
I mean, to your point, I don't think, like you said, they'll forget about, not that they'll forget about the championship,
right,
but it'll be in the rearview mirror, because and that's the same thing that happened. I mean, 2 heartbreaking 2-1 losses to North Carolina in 2 years in a row, and then to come here and finally get that win, even if it wasn't against North Carolina, is already a big deal. And maybe, does this mean this plot, or the strategy, I guess, is like teams like Liberty and St. Joseph's just beating North Carolina, and then Northwestern doesn't even have to face them. But beyond that, I think, it's a testament to Tracy Fuchs' kind of like longevity. I mean, she came in 2009, and people forget, like, this has taken a long, long time to come to fruition almost. I mean, obviously she's a legend in field hockey. I mean, a field hockey Hall of Famer for the national team, maybe even a bigger impact than she's had at Northwestern, which is insane to say, and even as a player herself. But I'd say, I mean, it took a long time. Northwestern wasn't even on the map until like recently, probably in the last 5 or 6 years when they start to finally come up and have the results from the immense work that Tracy Fuchs has put in. And I think the biggest testament also is attracting Ashley Sessa as well. I mean, obviously coming from UNC, and maybe she wanted a change of pace, but at the same time, I mean, she could have chosen any of these programs in the NCAA tournament and elevated them to an even greater level. And for her to be like, I want to come here. I mean, Tracy Fuchs is not the only women's field hockey coach who was on that U.S. Olympic team, and definitely not the only one who was trying to court Ashley Sessa. But
I'm sure they all were. I mean,
exactly. But I think that just shows that it's kind of like how we think about like Phil Jackson, for example, just being that guy who can, no matter who you have, and just managing those guys, or like Pat Ryan with the Miami Heat as well. Those are like things I would say for that.
No, it's a really exciting time, and I think we're all excited to see what comes next for Northwestern field hockey, because it does feel like it could be the start of a dynasty. And I think the big team standing in the way that obviously will want to, put a block in that will be the Tar Heels down in Chapel Hill. So that'll be something we will continue to watch for years to come. But for today, Northwestern field hockey on top of the mountain, really exciting stuff. To dampen the mood now. Also in Ann Arbor this weekend were the Wildcats for football. And before we get into what happened in that game, what were all of our expectations heading into that game? How optimistic were we? How pessimistic were we? I'm genuinely curious, because I think that's important context.
I mean, okay, I think that there are two parts of this. There's what were my expectations, and there also is kind of what was the general vibe, like what did people think was going to happen to Northwestern. And I'll actually start with that second one, because, I mean, there were a few optimists out there who said, Northwestern really has a shot at this game, like, this is not a great Michigan team, the stakes of this game are so high.
That may have been me.
May have been Sammy, roll the tape from
we probably have tape of me being an optimist.
Yeah, probably, but, so there were some people who said Northwestern really has a shot at this and can beat Michigan, or at the very least can make it very close, maybe send it into overtime. Then there were some people, I would include myself in this group, who said, I don't know if you can just sort of stroll into the big house, no matter how diminished this Michigan team is from last year, and win this game after only beating Purdue by 6 and falling to basically every other, conference opponent except for Maryland, which stinks this year. And so, I wasn't that optimistic. I didn't think it would be this bad. I didn't think it would be worse than the Ohio State Wrigley game.
Nobody did.
Which the Wrigley game was, like, technically a Northwestern home game, really more like neutral turf, or even honestly a home game for Ohio State, given how crazy their turnout was at Wrigley that day.
Yeah.
And so I don't think a lot of people expected that this game would turn out the way that it did. But this is pretty bad for David Braun and co. I think their defense, which has kind of been a central aspect of this team for the whole year, and kind of a defining thing where you could say, look, the offense isn't performing, we have some problems behind center, like, we're gonna figure that out, but our defense is there and strong, and I think this was a game that kind of went the other way for them, so that'll be something to reflect on in the future. But look, I really didn't see a way that Northwestern could be bowl eligible this year, and so I think this is something like what I thought this game would be, maybe just a touch more heartbreaking.
Yeah, you might have seen on the live stream, Calvin was smirking at me a little bit, and that's because on Moving the Chains, I may or may not have said that Northwestern would win.
May or may not.
Yeah, and I will say, in defense, the common factor, I mean, I think Sammy, me, and Jonah, myself and Jonah, all thought that Northwestern would win this game, and we're optimistic.
We had a conversation about this.
We were in
Norris.
Yeah,
I saw you guys, and I was like, guys, I think we got a shot. I'll you continue.
Yeah, and we were talking about, like, Sammy's the lucky charm. He went to Maryland, and they won, and so it has to be the same thing.
Guys, I am not the lucky charm. It was not me.
Well, I think the thing is, I think the common denominator here is we're all Bears fans, and so how we look at this is like, we don't have to ignore the fact that Northwestern isn't really that great this year, and instead be like, but they can win because they can. And that is kind of how I've addressed the Bears as well this year. And I know we'll get to that later, but I think to what Claire was talking about, a lot of similarities. I mean, David Braun, defensive coach, Matt Eberflus, defensive coach, failures in the defense, not actually being as good as they're supposed to be. And that's definitely what happened with Northwestern. But also, I mean, again, to the point, if I'm being completely honest, did I really believe what I was saying? Maybe. Yes, but also, at the back of my mind, it was there. And so it is fair that they got destroyed. I didn't think they're going to get destroyed this much. I don't think anyone did. But I think it is a testament to the strength of, like, the big house and all of that, and how Michigan is still Michigan. But I think the other thing is that we have to remember is that technically Northwestern is not out of the bowl race. This Illinois game still does matter because of a beautiful thing called academic progress rate, which, is that fair? Probably not. Should it be how it is? Probably not. But Northwestern is third in academic progress rate. All the people around them in the top 5, which is how you become bowl eligible with 5 wins, are already bowl eligible. And many of whom are even in the college football playoffs, so they don't need those bowl games. And so I think the biggest thing is going into this Illinois game, which I will be at, so hopefully... Or actually, they'll win because I'm there, yeah.
Right.
We'll just leave it there.
Pierson lucky charm.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I think logically it follows that if Sammy Krimstein isn't the single determinant of how Northwestern football performs, that it must be Pierson.
It's got to be one of us.
It's
got to be one of us here.
Really
one of the sports fans.
It must be a new low for this team to get compared to the Bears. Like, that's pretty. You can say, oh man, they're that's kind of a heartbreaking.
Chicago's
comparison.
Big Ten team.
Yeah, I mean it would.
Actually, both teams have the same record now, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's,
Oh boy.
yeah.
That's
But
rough.
look, all I have to say about academics is the students are pulling our weight. In terms of getting to this bowl game. Like we're doing what we
There we
can
go.
to help this team succeed. And so if the defense could just step it up for the rest of us, we're making some serious contributions here. And so we expect to see the same thing from the rest of the team.
Yeah, I shared a similar sentiment before this game happened. I thought Northwestern was going to win.
We had a little group chat, didn't we? And
yeah, I asked my friends what the score predictions were, and we all picked Northwestern by like 4 to 7 points. So that was pretty nice. Also, another Bears fan will be attending the Northwestern game this weekend, which is me. So
I think that means we're double lucky, right?
I would have to agree.
I will also be in attendance.
Oh, the triple
Yes.
lucky. I mean, I don't think you can defeat 3 Bears fans who are also Northwestern football fans. I think
Exactly.
that is the key.
Yeah, I was just looking at Davis Warren's stats because everyone this year has talked about how poor Michigan's passing offense has been, and it was his most completions, most pass attempts, second most yards in one game. He did have 1 pick early in the game, but the second half made up for his average performance. Northwestern's defense was no match for the short passing game that Michigan brought in, and the score showed that clearly. So I think they would need some luck on their side, I'd say, to beat Illinois. But maybe the 3 of us will be luck enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, lots of bad predictions all around. I will say, on moving the chains, Pierson, we had multiple people pick Northwestern, including Matt Campbell, who has been wrong 2 weeks in a row on moving the chains on Northwestern football predictions. But I did have Michigan in this game, but certainly not by that much. I had them by 8, so not by 44. Which is just insane to think about. And, I mean, really, another thing that we had mentioned on that podcast is talking about how Davis Warren's just not going to pick apart this Northwestern secondary. I mean, he kind of did. Like, he had under 200 yards passing, but if anyone was going to make Davis Warren look like he was close to being able to pick apart any secondary, it was Northwestern. I mean, I think it's super notable that he had 7 different guys get 2 or more receptions, and that was something that I think I was particularly wrong about in that prediction, because I think a lot of us thought that if they were able to contain Colston Loveland, that this offense wouldn't do much. And Loveland had just 3 catches and a touchdown, but so many other guys from Michigan were just getting involved. The running game, which was supposed to be a good matchup for Northwestern, they were supposed to be able to at least limit these guys who weren't as good as Ohio State's running backs last week. Edwards and Mullings had basically the same performance as Henderson and Judkins last week. I mean, it was more of the same for the running game. I mean, a bunch of other guys were getting carries too by the end of it. And for Northwestern, just same old, same old. Couldn't run the football. They didn't have any options outside of Bryce Kurtz and A.J. Henning. And I mean, most surprisingly of all, and maybe demonstrating his inconsistency, Jack Lausch, after playing a good game against Ohio State, just did not show up in a meaningful fashion against Michigan. It's been an inconsistent season for Lausch, an inconsistent season for the coaching staff. I think that's the story of the year for this team.
No, it's tough, and I really did think this was going to be a close game. I mean, to echo what you guys said, but I think we all kind of forgot. Michigan's having a down year, absolutely, but like this is still Michigan we're talking about, right?
Rivalry game.
Technically, a rivalry game.
Yes, it's 2021. I mean, will Northwestern ever win the rivalry game? That's a news story, I think.
Yeah. I mean, Michigan is like
much like the Bears.
Yeah. Well, we don't need to
Thanks,
talk about.
McClure.
There's really no relevant cities in Wisconsin besides Milwaukee, I'd say. I mean, Jonah and I actually were in Milwaukee this weekend.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, for Sports Management Club, which was very cool. We got this. We got crazy good seats. I will say we were in like not only were we in like the 100, like the bowl, like the lower level bowl, but we were like 5 rows from courtside.
That's insane.
And we got it all for it was crazy. I mean, I guess ad for Sports Management Club. I mean, if you want to have those types of opportunities, it's a barrier-free club, so join if you would like. I don't know how many.
Sounds awesome.
It is awesome, yeah. But I think the other thing is, I will say, on moving the chains, I kind of did bring up about how like because to Calvin's point, Matt Campbell was very, very adamant that the run game was actually not as bad as we thought and that it was very good. And the other thing was I pointed out how the run defense has kind of fallen apart. I mean, we talk all about the secondary, and obviously, I think it's kind of like spoken for. I don't even think I need to bring it up what the secondary has done this season. I don't want to get too like pessimistic and negative, but the run defense has also not been great. And yes, you can argue, maybe against the Iowa game, it's because Iowa has arguably the best running back in the country. But then when it's every single game, including against Purdue, it's like maybe just the whole defense.
It is an issue.
And I don't think it's necessarily personnel. I think some of these guys were here last year and looked a lot better. Maybe it's just a system. Maybe it's just after last year. I mean, some of the leaders on the team who left, maybe those holes haven't been filled. And I think the other thing I will say, one of my friends from Michigan came up probably like 3 weeks ago, and we played college football, Michigan versus Northwestern. I won 44-0.
Wow.
So I will say that is the amount they lost by, right? So maybe I get some credit for something?
Yeah, I think Pierson is clearly having an effect in one way or another. Maybe not a good way. I don't know. Yeah, just disappointing. I will say, I mean, like, I was there at this game. I thought maybe I'd be the lucky charm because I was also at the Maryland away game, and they looked like a completely different team than they've looked like in every other game this year. I was like, I don't really understand it. But I will say, I mean, just that venue makes an impact on games. And like, even when like, I mean, it was like packed. It was like 109,000 people were there. Like, unreal.
That's not as big as Northwestern Medicine Field.
Like, it didn't even feel like it was like as rowdy as it gets there sometimes, right? It was Northwestern, but like, even when it's not at its like peak level, like, you could tell that Jack Lausch, that was having an effect on his game. You could tell that like, that atmosphere there in Ann Arbor was messing with this entire offense. And, I mean, you could talk about the defense all you want. It was bad. It was really bad. You give them 50 points. But, like, I mean, the offense had, like, 2 drives where they looked competent. I mean, Jack Lausch was, not that we were expecting him to be Superman, but, like, it was really rough. And it was a huge step back from where he looked decent against Ohio State. So, I do want to give credit to the Big Blue faithful because that it has an impact on games. I mean, the 2 games that they've lost at the Big House in the past, I mean, this season, but they were undefeated last year. So in the past 2 years, were against Oregon and Texas, who are looking like the 2 best teams in the country right now. So that is a venue that is just tough to go into, and especially for Northwestern coming off of, you know, playing a lot smaller venues. Wrigley Field, that is, for a college football venue, small. The Northwestern Medicine Field, that is minuscule for college football. So, Big House had an impact.
Yeah, and, you know, sometimes you think you're a lucky charm and you're actually just a marshmallow. And so, you know, I think it's always tough when that happens. But, speaking of fields, I do feel like we have to talk about the new renderings of Ryan
Yeah.
Field,
Wow.
which is upcoming, hopefully for Sammy's and my senior year, for y'all's junior year. Really hoping that the two of us at least get to be here for a year of that.
Yeah, me too.
But this is the most expensive college football stadium, or set to be the most expensive ever built. I don't think anyone predicts that it's going to get less expensive as construction continues, if anything, more expensive. And it's designed to amplify the sound of an otherwise small group of fans, which is a very nerdy solution to a very nerdy problem at a nerdy football school, which is that attendance, as a result of being a smaller top 10 university, is a little bit lower than it's going to be at, say, Ohio State or Michigan. And so, to me, this really just looks like such an awesome project, and a commitment to the future of Northwestern football that says, hey, we're going to be on par with, or better and bigger and better than the rest of the Big Ten. And so I think NIL going forward will be, will need to be a massive part of any strategy to attract talent. But I'm curious to hear what you guys, I don't know, did all of you see the renderings, or
Of course,
some of
yeah.
you? I'm
Yes.
curious to hear what y'all thought about that.
I mean, yeah, you could argue that. And the biggest thing I noticed was the fact that other Big Ten fans felt the need to comment on socials, but it's actually not that big. Well, I'm sorry that your ego is broken and that your stadium's not as cool as our $850 million one. And I will say, the biggest question here isn't even about the stadium or about its effect or about anything. I think the biggest question is, will it get done on time? And I think that's a big problem with a project of this scale. I mean, you've seen tons of mega projects over the years just across not just sports but anything just be delayed for various reasons. And hopefully, with a school like Northwestern, an endowment as big as Northwestern, that they can just throw money at it and it'll just happen. But I could definitely see, I was talking to some people, that I could see the stadium ending up costing $1 billion for them, even if it's not on paper $1 billion. I mean, overall, just the certain things they're going to have to do, that extra $150 million, to Claire's point, has to be used for things like NIL and advertising and other things to get people excited about Northwestern football. Because right now, I don't want to say nobody is. I'm still excited about Northwestern football, but at the same time, it's really hard to be like, oh, you should really invest your time and money into this team when they're losing 50-6 against Michigan, and a weak Michigan, and a Michigan who is nothing like the usual Michigan. And it's to say, what can they do for the future? What I will say is, though, the technology seems super cool. It reminds me of what the Clippers did with their new stadium, with the whole sound stuff. And I think that will definitely be necessary, because with a school where we're already 11,000 less undergraduate than the next biggest Big Ten school, which is Iowa, I mean, it's good. It's hard, especially adding teams like USC and UCLA, which have huge national followings. And to the point about Wrigley Field being full of Ohio State fans, it's hard, even in our own metropolitan area, to even match that level. So if they figure out a way, and if this works, and if they limit tickets for away fans and do all the stuff that they're saying, then I think it definitely will have a big impact. To Sammy's point about people like Jack Lausch being influenced by a stadium like that, having that on the other side is also really important, because it's not just Jack Lausch at the Big House who has the impact with that noise, and I think having that will be cool. And what I hope for, we talked about this a little bit, and I talked about this on Moving the Change as well a couple weeks ago. It's kind of about the future of the quarterbacking position and who will be that guy to lead them into the era of the new stadium. Well, I hope, and who I'm looking for, is their top prospect this year, Marcus Romaine. He's not. I don't feel like they've been talking about prospects that much, because I think everyone just assumes they'll go through the transfer portal for QB. But what I will argue is Mike Wright did not work out, and if Mike Wright was the top person you could attract last year, after this year's performance, I'm not sure what quarterbacks who are transferring are attracted to Northwestern, Medicine Field, and other things, which is unfortunate, because I think they're missing out on a beautiful, amazing atmosphere. But Marcus Romaine, he's a 3-star prospect from Marietta, Georgia, which, as Cubs fans, I think you'll recognize this as the hometown of Dansby Swanson. But when I did research, when I did research on this, it turns out that Marietta, Georgia is a hot spot for really great professional athletes. And I talked
talking about this.
Calvin, I talked about this, Calvin, as well on the show. Scoot Henderson, Colin Sexton, Finals MVP Jaylen Brown. You have guys like Carter Keeban, like we mentioned, Dansby Swanson,
Nationals legend.
Josh and Nate Lowe are also from Marietta, Georgia. So hopefully, using that trend, I feel I hate to be the guy who's like, oh, we have all these trends and good luck and all these random charms. Maybe, just maybe, because of those factors, he can be the guy to lead them into the next.
Are you calling it?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
He's not that confident. He's not that confident.
No. I've been wrong. I was wrong against Michigan in an embarrassing fashion, so I don't think I can be that optimistic yet. But I think that'll be a big thing. Is who will be that person to lead them in.
and to your point, I did want to have this conversation, and then we'll move on to basketball. We're going long on Northwestern sports, but I think I want to continue going because there's so much to talk about. David Braun has been involved in this process with the Ryans, who are the ones presenting Northwestern with this incredible endowment of money.
Shout out, Aon.
Shout out, yeah. But Braun has been involved in this process, and I believe his contract is up after next season. So, and obviously this has been a weird year, inconsistent, but this last game yesterday at Michigan was bad, especially that defense, which is his thing. I mean, he came to Northwestern as the defensive coordinator, right? The defense looked terrible. So with this new field, and the new era will be starting seems to be shortly after Braun's contract is up, do we think he makes it? And what needs to happen next season for him to get another go at it in Evanston?
I mean, I think I'll be quick here because I want to let the other guys speak. I feel like we've spoken too much. But I'll say the biggest thing is he needs to win the rivalry game against Illinois, and I know that's a big ask considering that Illinois is probably their best state in the last 10 years, probably.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, I don't want to say that this Michigan game was the nail in the coffin necessarily because it seems like how Northwestern will operate will be to let him finish out his contract no matter what. However, I feel like if he loses out, I feel like there will be a lot of calls, and probably maybe bigger than what they're used to, of like, this is not acceptable, and it sucks because David Braun is clearly a good coach. He's reigning Big Ten Coach of the Year.
And he's likable, too.
And he's really likable.
He's just a likable guy, good story.
All that football family stuff, and I really, really like that. But at the same time...
Performance is performance.
Performance is performance.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this will probably be similar to the conversation we have about the Bears later, but I'll let the other guys talk.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I feel like much of David Braun's success as Northwestern's head coach is riding off of the improvement that they made with him at coach, which, though they didn't make a bowl game, their team still was not great.
They won.
They did
Don't
win.
forget that.
They won a bowl game.
They did win a bowl game at 6-6. They next year have as hard of a schedule as they did this year. They play Oregon.
I believe they were 7-5 last year.
Yeah, they were 7-5.
They were 7-5.
Oh,
You're being too
yeah,
pessimistic,
so sorry.
man.
8-5 with a bowl victory.
Yeah, so that's actually very good.
That is good. But then
cooked.
with this downturn this year and then next year facing off against Oregon, Michigan, USC, Penn State,
the conference ain't getting easier.
It is not. So I think though David Braun does bring a great atmosphere to the team, and it feels like lots of the players really enjoy.
They're behind him.
They love him and how he leads the team. I think bringing in a new era of the new stadium, I'm assuming, unless barring a miracle season with lots of upsets next year, I think it'll be the end of the Braun era in Northwestern.
It's David Ross to correct counsel. That's what I'll say. I think that could be the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Pierson that it's not necessarily going to happen this year. I do think for next year he'd really have to get to a bowl game at the very least to have a chance to stay around. I do agree with what's been said about how I think he's got a lot of great attributes to him as a coach, and he may have the locker room, but I think what's important is that he may have the locker room, but it's college football. He has to be able to recruit. And these players who only get a short amount of time to kind of get to know him, and a lot of whom have offers from many other schools, aren't going to just overlook the record, overlook the performance on the field, and say, oh, David Braun's a really, really good guy. I really want to come to Northwestern. Him being a good coach, unless he's at the level of someone like Nick Saban, which obviously he is not going to necessarily attract top recruits on its own. There has to be a reputation for the program beyond what goes on in the inner workings of the locker room for this team to be successful. And so ultimately you can say what you want, and that is a fantastic attribute that David Braun can have, like positivity in the locker room, can have faith from his players, even if things are going downhill. Don't get me wrong, and it doesn't make him a bad coach, but that's just the sad reality of college football. As a coach, you have to be able to recruit. And if Braun's not able to recruit, and he's not able to get a quarterback in town that can do something significantly better than what has happened this year, then that's going to be a long-term issue, in my opinion.
Here's the deal from my perspective. I think he's guaranteed another year. We talk about what the standard is. Ultimately, this is Northwestern football that's adjusting to a new era of the sport entirely, especially in the area of recruitment when it comes to NIL and the transfer portal, and all of these other factors that make it difficult to recruit from a school in a powerhouse conference that isn't a powerhouse, from a school that as of now has limited NIL opportunities, and, you know, in addition to that, you know, from a school that has such high academic standards that it can be difficult to sort of pour everything into football. You know, that being said, I do agree that next year is really going to be a test for Braun, especially as the school heads into a new era. I would not be surprised if we see a rollout of some kind of new NIL situation to accompany the new stadium. I don't think it makes sense to make that kind of an investment in a program and then, you know, not invest in the players in a way that players now expect. But looking ahead at next year, you know, the Cats are going to play Tulane. They'll play Illinois, Nebraska, Michigan, Minnesota, Oregon, Purdue, UCLA, Penn State, and USC. I mean, UCLA, USC, and Purdue and Minnesota have not exactly been the most amazing teams this year. I think we'll see how they adjust for next year. But, you know, those are already some games that, as of right now, look winnable. Obviously, you've got that rivalry game. You've got a game against Tulane, maybe Nebraska. These are not games that the Cats, I think, would be winning now, necessarily. But if Braun can get them up to a point where they're beating basically everyone except for, you know, Michigan, Oregon, Penn State, some of the top teams in the conference, I think he has a really solid argument for why he gets to stay, especially because he's been such a huge part of defining this new era of Northwestern football. After everything that happened with Pat Fitzgerald and the team there, you know, it wasn't just the hazing allegations. It was the fact that they had, what was it, like an 11-1 or 1-11 record.
They did not win a game on American soil
They
that
did not
year.
win a game on American soil.
Yeah.
This team was coming from a very rough place before Coach Braun took the helm.
Mm-hmm.
He did a fantastic job last year. He was the guy who really made the Lakeside Field happen. He, you know, his family put in the first, you know, major donation to make that happen. He believed in that project, which has been incredible for the campus community. And so I think he's given so much to this program already, even though he's had such a short tenure. There have been some coaching mistakes that happened this year, especially as, you know, we brought in Zach Lujan, and, you know, we saw the offense kind of adjust early on in the season. There were some questionable play calls. So, again, if next year is a complete disaster, I can see Northwestern wanting to go in a new direction with a new athletic director as well. But if Braun can put something together next season, I would hope that he gets to keep his job.
Yeah. And before we move on to basketball, we can keep talking about football for a while. There's a lot to say. I will kind of bounce off what Claire said, and, like, not necessarily that I think they will keep Braun after his contract is up, because, you know, as much of an optimist I am, I'm a realist, and, like, next year the schedule's not getting any easier, and Northwestern is losing key players. AJ Henning and Bryce Kurtz, their leading receivers, gone. Cam Porter, wearing number 1, the de facto team leader, their leading rusher, who could be playing in the NFL next year, he is gone. Xander Mueller, another potential NFL guy, gone. There are probably others I'm forgetting, but, like, Northwestern is losing its core next year. They're losing the heart of the team next year. So it's going to be really tough for David Braun to take a team that is struggling, that will lose its best players with a really just as difficult schedule next year, and succeed. The cards are stacked against him. But I do hope that, to Claire's point, what he's done for this program is taken into consideration, because I think he is the right face for Northwestern football. Like, just his vibe, his energy, what he says. I mean, last year, what he did to take a Northwestern football team from a PR perspective that was coming out of that scandal, and really just kind of, like, take the team and make it into a good story. Turn it into something that was, this team overcame an obstacle, and take a team that had these incredible obstacles and win a bowl game last year. For him to do that brought so much to this program. For the Lakeside Field, right? I mean, you mentioned it. He brought that to this program. Really, I really think he spearheaded that with his family, and he is the kind of guy you want at the helm at a school like Northwestern, a kind of underdog sort of guy at an underdog sort of school. And I really am rooting for him, and I hope he can overcome the odds of next season and stay Northwestern's head coach, because I would really like for him to be the one to take Northwestern into this new era with the new Ryan Field and hopefully get some better recruiting classes, because that would truly be exciting. I would love a successful Northwestern football program under David Braun's leadership. Will it happen? I'm not sure, but I will say as much as that I am really, really pulling for him to succeed, because I like him a lot. He's a easy one to root for. But now to the floor, we will touch on men's and women's. The beauty of having a longer show, we can really go into depth about all these Northwestern sports, which is great. The men's, they played 2 games.
Basketball.
Men's basketball,
Yes.
yes. Men's basketball. They won 2 games this week. They won against Montana State in a close one, and then they took care of business against Pepperdine on Friday. Brooks Barnheiser came back for the first time since last year. His first game as a Wildcat without Boo Booey on the roster, which is weird for all of us Wildcat fans. It was always, Boo and Brooks, right? So it's definitely a weird moment for this program. But the first time that we have seen all these pieces play together for the first time. I mean, they've only practiced together 4 or 5 times. So still kind of getting things going, and this is when you want to do it in non-conference play, but they did take care of business twice. Guys, what are our thoughts on how this team is gelling now that we're seeing all of the pieces for the first time?
I agree, Sammy, that they took care of business. I think they took care of business the way that CVS Pharmacy takes care of business when you're picking up a prescription, which is you get what you need at the very end, but really not at the pace or with the excellence that you would kind of expect of such an institution. And so I think Northwestern men's basketball has a really similar problem, which is just that they've sort of lagged behind people's expectations in some of these non-conference games, which should be very, very easy. That happened when they went into overtime with Eastern Illinois. It happened against Montana State, which they beat by fewer than 5 points. That's a tiny, tiny difference right there. A 3-point difference, like literally one possession. And so it was nice to see a much more decisive 68-50 victory against Pepperdine. And I think that this is a squad that's heading in the right direction, and that's seeing some of its younger talent, whether that's Jalen Leach, who people see as sort of a substitute for Boo Booey, or as close to that as you could get, early on in his career. Justin Mullins, who looked great against Pepperdine. And maybe in some of that, you're also seeing a return to the defensive identity of this team. This is just sort of like a really gritty blue-collar team, always has been under Coach Collins. And you can see, guys like Barnheiser really bringing that component back in now that he's back in the game. And so, Ty Berry, a lot of questions. Matt Nicholson, I'm happy he's doing a bit better on the glass. I'd like to see him score, given his size. I think that there are a lot of things. Passing, this team really needs to tighten up its passing. I saw a lot of bad passes against Montana State. But I was happy with the defense against Pepperdine, and I think that's the direction they need to be going in.
Yeah, I feel like the biggest thing that Brooks was bringing back, obviously besides, a good scorer is the defense, and it seemed like with the number of close wins that Northwestern had in their first couple games, they needed some defense to just appear out of nowhere, and it seems like Brooks has brought that. He put up 14-8 in his first half of play of the season, and he got into foul trouble.
In his first half. Not game. That was a half of play. Yeah.
Yeah. Against Montana State, and he got into foul trouble, which led to Montana State scoring 9 threes in the entire game. Northwestern's 3 defense has been subpar, to say the least, this year, and I feel like when Brooks was not in foul trouble against Pepperdine, let's say they could help build the stadium because they were shooting a lot of bricks.
Ooh.
But I feel like just overall the chemistry of the team is just brought together by Brooks and just other players like Justin Mullins stepping up.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, to me, I'm definitely sharing the same concern that Claire is about the fact that Northwestern feels like they're kind of playing down to these opponents. I will say Montana State's not that bad of a team. They made the NCAA First Four last year and almost made the tournament.
3 years in a row.
Yeah, they've been there.
I was going to make that point. Montana State is... they gave Wisconsin a run for their money this year. They're going to be one of those middle of the pack Big Ten teams. They've been in the tournament. They won their conference 3 years in a row. Like, this is not they're not scheduling Mickey Mouse, cupcake non-cons.
I mean,
Pepperdine
maybe
wasn't great.
Pepperdine.
Pepperdine
Yeah.
was kind of Mickey
Yeah.
Mouse. But, like, a lot of these non-cons are, like, pretty solid teams that, Montana State's probably one of the better ones, but they got Butler coming up. That's a fun one. In that tournament where, like, I think Mississippi State, UNLV, like, these are respectable programs. But,
Yeah, and that is a good point, Sammy, that, we do have to give credit to some of these teams. Dayton, the game that they lost.
Dayton, I mean, that's
that's
legit.
Absolutely. If Northwestern is a true bubble team, Dayton is in the tournament for sure. And so, it's not that they're, as you said, playing, cupcakes and smiley faces and jelly donuts, but this isn't Illinois or Purdue either. And so when you're looking ahead at the rest of the season, and maybe what some expectations are now, things are different. And yes, there was that Chicago State loss last year. This team tends to play down to the level of competition.
But they're winning these games.
They're winning these
They're
games.
winning
exactly.
these games.
So don't be entirely pessimistic. Just also, Coach Collins said not a work of art, and I think that's a pretty generous description of what we've seen so far.
Yeah, if you just look at the wins and losses, they've done exactly what's expected this year. Against Dayton, that's a team. You could say they could have gone out and maybe should have won on the road, but Dayton's, you could argue, was still favored. It's a home matchup for them.
That's a tough environment to play in.
Environment.
Dayton is, don't sleep on it.
And Dayton is still objectively, like, higher rated by most, like, I would say bracketologists and, like, rankers right now. Like, even so before the win. Like, it was a pretty even matchup team-wise. Maybe you could even argue Dayton's slightly better at this point, just roster-wise. And, they've really got some good players in that roster. But really, 5-1, probably about what you would expect through these first 6 games for Northwestern. I would say so.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with all of that. What I will say, Montana State shot 41% from 3. That's really good, and that's why they were in that game. What was a little bit concerning to me, though, was, obviously Northwestern won by 18 against Pepperdine, but it kind of felt a lot closer than that. And I think Pepperdine shot 29%. Like, they were not a good team, and Northwestern was going to beat them unless they, everyone got injured or something, and a catastrophe happened. However, what was a little bit concerning for me was they just felt really sluggish. Pepperdine did shoot 29%, but they only made 8 less field goals than Northwestern on the same amount of shots, which is concerning. You want to be destroying a team like Pepperdine, and a lot of the Big Ten, who they're going to be facing now when the calendar flips to December, are destroying these non-conference teams, including the ones who were in the tournament or not. They're winning. You can see teams putting up 90 to 100 points. And granted, maybe some of those opponents are worse than Pepperdine or other teams, but what it does feel like is it will be a very gritty season for Northwestern. I'm not sure where they are. What I will say is I was at media availability after the MSU game, and you could tell that Brooks and Nick are so happy to be back on the floor together, and I think that is the biggest story. Boo and Brooks to Brooks and Nick, right? That's where we're at right now, and Nick's kind of going to be their guy for the next 2 seasons, hopefully. And it's going to be important for them to be consistent. Obviously, Nick Marinelli has been extremely consistent and been one of the best players in the Big Ten. However, in that Pepperdine game, Brooks Barnheiser shot 4 for 12. And maybe that's just because he's a little bit rusty and maybe hasn't played. But also, you really want to see him when he's taking that volume to be kind of getting to that same level as Nick or even above him. Because, Brooks is your number 1 player. So what I will say is we'll see in the next... Honestly, in this little stretch they have going before this Illinois game and, the tournament over Thanksgiving and some of those other games, what they do. And what I think the biggest question is, how does Brooks fit into this team? Because the first 2 games, even though they were close, chemistry was off the charts. And now they seem a little bit disorganized, so we'll see how he fits in there.
Yeah, and I don't think there's going to be an issue of fitting in.
I don't mean...
It's an issue of they just haven't played.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In all these press conferences, Collins is definitely, beating that point down into the ground. Let's not panic here, right? This team has not played together. I think, with basketball especially, that is crucial. Baseball, I think you can throw a group together, right? You throw a group together, they can play. But basketball, that chemistry is needed. You need to know. It's an instinct, and I think that's what made Northwestern so successful these past 2 seasons. They had a lot of these guys that had been coming back to this program that had been here for a while. They knew what to expect of Collins. They knew what to expect of each other, and I think a lot of people don't realize is, I mean, yes, Northwestern lost Boo Buie, but Northwestern has the highest percentage of returning minutes in the entire conference. Martinelli, who was very good last year, is coming back. Barnheiser, Nicholson, right? I mean, these guys who've been in the program for years and years aren't going anywhere. They lost Boo Buie, and that's a big loss, but this is still a very similar team, and I think they're going to be a fun one. I know there's a lot of pessimism right now, but non-conference is always kind of a weird time, and I don't know if you can make, it's kind of like preseason in NFL, right? Like you can't make too many stark judgments unless there's some really drastic stuff, and I don't think there's been drastic stuff. It's really been a team that is getting its feet wet with a new cast of characters, and it's been exciting, honestly, because I think we're starting to see the progress. I think Pepperdine, while yes, they could have blown them up by 50, I think they did take some steps in the right direction. It did feel smoother, and it did feel like they could kind of control the game a little bit more than they did in some of these other non-conference matchups. I think coming up next, Butler, that'll be a fun one. And then
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, Thanksgiving. So
watch it with your family.
Yeah, eat some turkey, chocolate pie, and watch Northwestern basketball because that'll be a fun one. And then conference play gets going after that. Iowa and Illinois. I mean, not true conference play, but they do get their first taste of it. And the Illinois game is one that I know. I mean, Iowa. I mean, they're a team that is ranked towards the bottom, but you can't really pass up any Big Ten team.
No, yeah. Especially away.
And Iowa, they were the only team to beat Northwestern at the Welsh last year. So it'll be in Iowa City, but still, one Northwestern will be looking at. But the one we're all circling on the calendar is December 6th, when they take on the Illini, the rivalry game. I was there when they played them last year at the Welsh, and man, was that game electric. I mean, outside of the Purdue game, probably the best atmosphere that arena saw all season long. What's our sense going into that one? I know it's a ways away, but this will likely be our last episode before that game. So what's the vibe? I mean, do we think Northwestern can stick around with this Illinois team that is supposed to be very good, but also, I mean, they lost a lot of key pieces, more key pieces than Northwestern lost in this offseason.
I mean, yeah, obviously this season Illinois' only losses are against ranked teams, Ole Miss and Alabama. And they've kind of handled all those other non-conference opponents. However, I mean, it's Maryland, Eastern Shore, Oakland, East. Although they did destroy EIU, which maybe you can make some things there. But also, I mean, it's the start of the season, right? So I don't think that's that big of a deal. Yeah. What I will say, I mean, I definitely think to the question of whether they can stick with them, I do think that Northwestern can stick with them. I think every Big Ten team, maybe barring maybe a few at the bottom, can be competitive with each other. I mean, we saw this last year with just how many Big Ten teams made the tournament. But also, I mean, you see, this is a thing they have every year. It's always a problem of what Big Ten team will we not let in the tournament? What is that team who will just barely miss out? And so I don't think you can. I think the biggest indicator will be how they look at Iowa. I mean, it will be a tough environment. I think Caitlin Clark brought that basketball energy and has kind of not only elevated the women's team there, but also the men's team. And then that's not to say that they didn't have support before, but I definitely think there's a little bit of that kind of aura that's left from her impact. Both there and on the conference. The biggest thing I'm looking for Northwestern, actually I think what is underappreciated as well, is the impact of Jalen Leach coming in as the transfer. I mean, we were talking about who can replace Boo Buie, and Nick Martinelli has been their top scorer in every game except for 2, and both of those were 27, and this past game against Pepperdine, 21 for Jalen Leach. And I think that's a big thing. I mean, if you want to talk about filling the shoes of a guy like Boo Buie, you that's kind of the exact piece you want. And that's because of the fact that I feel like Leach's game is very complementary to kind of Martinelli, and Barnheiser's kind of just tough, gritty, get to the paint and just have sweet moves to get a bucket. And I feel like Jalen Leach can be that guy who, if they don't have the opportunity, they can just pass it out, and he's consistent to make a 3 or a long 2 or something like that. And I think that would be really important because
consistency could be an issue with Leach. That's something with
Yeah.
Boo. That's what they had, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Boo Buie, you could count on him basically every game except for maybe one last year. He would get the job done, and that's where it's going to be tricky for Northwestern this year. But what do you guys like?
Exactly. That's what.
Where is it going to come from?
That's what I'm saying. I feel like it has to come from him, and I also think that the big thing that Chris Collins has been talking about, and obviously we didn't see this in the Montana State game because he was it's a close game. We're not going to let the bench guys get that many minutes because we need to win this one, and they win. But what will be interesting is, I mean, clearly he is trusting KJ Wyndham and Angela Ciravino to be in this rotation consistently. It's not just a case of, at the start of the year we're giving them minutes, let them adjust and make
They're
them
going to
want
be playing
stay.
minutes.
They're playing minutes. They will be an important part of this team. And obviously we've talked about them being roommates before, but I mean, I think that Luke Hunger, guys off the bench maybe are even more important than some of these bigger names, because at the end of the day, probably one of Jalen Leach, Nick Martinelli, and Brooks Barnheiser will drop at least 20 points in most of their games this season. However, the question is when they're off the court, when it's not all three of those guys, when, for example, I mean, especially Brooks, they're kind of easing him in. I mean, he's going to need some time on the bench to rest and make sure because he's their most important player, right? So can those guys who are coming in have that impact? I think the other thing, honestly, is with Luke Hunger, I think, I don't want to say that Matt Nicholson has looked uninspiring. I don't really know how to phrase it, but it just seems like maybe it's just because it's not conference games, but it almost looks like he's the one who's trying the least on the court. And I don't mean that in like a bad way. I just mean it more so like, and maybe it's just because he's such a huge guy that he doesn't really need to put that much effort into doing what he does great. But I mean, against this Pepperdine team, he got like dunked on twice. He only had 9 rebounds, which I mean, obviously that's still, 5 rebounds, not 9.
I think that's his season best.
That's his season best, and I think that's
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 something that was not the case last year.
Yeah, that's
like
what
he was sweeping up rebounds.
Yeah,
last year.
and that's something that I think will be interesting for this Northwestern team is kind of him getting in his rhythm, because it's kind of the underappreciated part of the game. You want to look at points, but I mean rebounds are just as important to get that possession. And if he's getting boxed out or just kind of by these guys who are on these non-conference teams, not like they're not athletic or anything, but like what will happen when you have big guys on some of these other teams who can kind of just like push you away? I don't know. That's kind of what I'm thinking about here.
Yeah, I think like what you brought up with Northwestern having the most returning minutes in the Big Ten. Like obviously Illinois has scored a lot of points in their game so far this year, but it's like if Northwestern can keep up the momentum and like keep the guys that need to contribute. Like obviously they've had good games from most of their players. Like Nick Martinelli has put up points in every single game, but if Jalen Leach, as we talked about him, and Ty Berry can, if they're a little less consistent, then guys like Justin Mullins are going to have to step in and get buckets. And just also like in the Pepperdine game, Luke Hunger had more boards than Matt Nicholson and played one more minute. Like just those impact moves like off the bench and just people like looking to work together that like with, because they have experience playing with each other from last year, even if it's guys that are sophomores or just are new to the team, they're still more used to each other than the people in Illinois.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
All right, sorry for the brief delay here. And Calvin was making a point here about Northwestern basketball, and we will let him continue here.
Yeah, so just, I mean, we're talking about Illinois basketball versus Northwestern, and, I mean, you made the point, Jonah. This is really just, you look at the roster from last year and this year for Illinois, it's so different. And it's not even just like Terrence Shannon Jr. being gone. Everybody's gone for Illinois, and it's just a whole new team. It's really incredible, first of all, that Brad Underwood still made the team like pretty much as good as they were last year, like considering all of this. But you've got different scorers, and I will say at the forward position and at center, their top 3 scorers come from those positions. It's not really the guards this time around for Illinois, so it's kind of a different look team, if you will, for the Fighting Illini. I am looking forward to that game, especially, I mean, with the atmosphere that it's going to provide, the rivalry game. But, of course, Northwestern can't be overlooking this remaining non-conference schedule, because this is really where it starts to ramp up. We talked about this last week on the show. You start to hit these high major teams, and that's how it's going to be for the rest of the season. So it's all about, I mean, we've said Northwestern can both play up and play down to their competition. They've got to start playing up, and they've got to find consistent scoring options to end those scoring droughts that they've had, because while guys like Jalen Leach have played better, while guys like Nick Martinelli have been able to score big time, at the end of the day, you just have to have that consistency even when the top guys aren't on the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's going to be the big question, because last year they had the consistency, as I mentioned, from Boo Buie. Where's it going to come from this year? And I think they have a really fun duo with Martinelli and Barnheiser. There's a lot of fun potential there. I mean, two wacky kind of guys, very unique styles of play with both of them. And I think it's going to have to be, one of them's going to have to start contributing, and it's going to have to be Jalen Leach. And also Ty Berry, like when he was going last year, he was one of the best three-point shooters, not only in the conference, but in the country. That has not been there
He needs to
in
get going.
any
He has to.
way this year. And I think he might be the most critical piece, where if he could get going like he got going last year, Northwestern can be a top 5 team in the conference. And I think if he doesn't get going, I think Northwestern is really capped, because that's a role that, like, I think every team has. And I feel like there aren't a lot of other guys on Northwestern you can really count on from beyond the arc. And Ty Berry can be really good from beyond the arc, but he can also be really bad. I mean, he's a hot and cold guy. So, like, he's got to turn it up and get consistent. Before we move on to some of our other segments, we probably won't have too much time about for national sports today, but I love focusing on Northwestern when we can. Let's talk about the women's basketball team, and they only played one game this week, and they were destroyed by the Harvard Crimson, 75-50. A Harvard team that is playing well. They've only lost once. Could be one of the better teams in the Ivy League this year, but let's be honest. This was a Northwestern team that was supposed to be a lot better. They brought in a lot of pretty high-profile transfers and a very strong freshman class. And so far, at least, besides that one win against Utah at home, it's just fallen flat. I mean, they got out-rebounded by 20. And that was supposed to be an area that Northwestern was going to be better. So, like, is the season... I mean, it's not conference play, so you can't get too deep into the speculation, right? But, like, how concerned are we? Like, because it's seeming like this may be the state of this team, and I guess a follow-up to that would be, how hot is the seat for Joe McEwen?
Yeah, I mean, before I get into the negatives, I mean, I will say I was on the call for this game for WNUR Sports last Saturday, so experienced all of it in person. Before I get into the negatives, I will say this Harvard team is legit. They are good. They are as good as they've been in maybe almost 20 years. They could make the NCAA tournament this season, and that's maybe for the first time since 2007, which would mean they would win the conference for the first time in a long time, because ever since the Ivy Leagues had a conference tournament, Harvard's never won it, and Princeton's won it the last 5 times in a row. I think Harvard could easily be better than Princeton this year, which is a big change. But with that being said, Northwestern didn't do a whole lot right. I will say there were some positives coming out of this game, but the rebounding was brutal, and the continued allowing of corner shooters for 3 on the perimeter was just bad, because Harvard has too many weapons for players to be wide open every time there's one pass or a pass into the post, kick out into the corner, somebody's just wide open. That just cannot be happening like that, these defensive lapses. The one positive I will say is that Northwestern actually contained by far Harvard's best player in Harmony Turner. She was averaging 23.8 heading into the game, one of the best in the NCAA. She's an incredible distributor, and Northwestern really just played great help defense on her, locked her down. She only scored 8 and was started off the game something like 2 for 9 from the field, was really not shooting very well at all, and Northwestern had her handled. The problem is, she's a smart basketball player, and she knows if she's not open, other players will be, and there were so many Harvard players hitting threes, especially in that second half, and getting boards to where Northwestern was just getting run out of the gym. So, I mean, I'm really not surprised that they lost to Harvard. Harvard is a good team. They beat a ranked, at the time, Indiana, but at the same time, Sammy, like you mentioned, 25-point loss is just brutal, and I mean, it's hard to say. It's always hard to say about, like, the hot seat with someone like Joe McEwen, right? Because it's his 17th season with the team, and he's been there for a long time, and he's had a lot of great success. So it really just depends on how, when, and / if Northwestern decides it's looking like. He gets a longer leash, obviously, than a newly tenured coach who's doing something like this. But which season would it end up being if this continues? As much production off the bench. Caroline Lau, when she was in foul trouble, it was hard for Northwestern to find significant guard production in terms of passing lanes. I think we saw some improvement from someone like Zamaya Walton, but when you have the assists leader in Caroline Lau on the bench in key times, that's what's super tough for this team, and they're going to have to find some depth somehow.
Yeah, and I'll be covering the women's basketball team I think 5 times in winter break, so I'll see them a lot, and maybe after winter
Chicagoland people stepping up. We love to see it.
So maybe I'll have some more in-depth thoughts after that stretch if I come back on the show in the winter. But what I would say is, yeah, to that point, Northwestern, ever since they made the tournament in 2021, and obviously in 2020 they won the regular season champion, didn't end up winning the tournament. But I mean, they've been the worst team in the Big Ten for like what at this point is 3 to 4 straight years, and I don't want to say that maybe that's just because it's a transition, and obviously a lot of their players after that tournament appearance obviously left or moved on to greener pastures. But I mean, I do think it's a problem. I mean, obviously we talk about a leash, and yes, it's been 19 years or 17, whatever. Sorry, whatever the time is since 2008. You have to start to think, like, maybe it's just kind of over. Maybe his time is over. Maybe they just look in a new direction, even after this season. And obviously you want to give him some grace because of how great he's been for this program. But at the same time, for them to be consistent in being bad for this kind of stretch is kind of like we already passed that peak of what his coaching is going to be, and now it's kind of just going down. And again, that's not like a personal thing or anything, but I feel like that's kind of a big deal, especially considering two 4-star recruits, a bunch of returning players. They should have been much better than they're looking.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing I will say, Kaylee Walsh leading off the bench is kind of important considering she's coming off injury. I think that is a big part of kind of her not being able to start so far. So maybe that'll be a bigger deal in the future once she kind of gets going. However, I mean, this Northwestern team, the biggest thing is not only efficiency, I'd argue it's honestly volume. I mean, Harvard only shot 3% better from the field and only 5% better from 3.
That's what happens when you're out rebounded by 20. Frankly, it's just
but to have 63 shots against is insane in any sense.
You don't win those. Like 9 times out of 10, you lose that basketball game.
It's unwinnable when it's 63 to 48. When you're that much, I mean. It's a huge gap, and I'm not really sure what they can do because it doesn't really seem like a singular problem, and it also seems like a lot of their problems they had last year are just being amplified. I think like rebounding and defense, and so I don't really know what they can do. I mean, I think it's just kind of the type of thing where you just kind of just have to let it take its course, and maybe you'll be surprised with stuff like people being moved into the starting lineup or moved out of the starting lineup. Maybe they'll have to make some drastic changes, but as of right now, it's really unclear where this team is going this year and where this program will go in the future, which is a little bit unfortunate considering the upward trend of the men's team.
Yeah, I think, like, as we've talked about, like, with non-conference play, it is important to give the team a little bit of time to see if they can develop, especially with the new players coming in, see if they can build some chemistry with each other and try to develop a rapport on the court. But in their past 3 games, they've had over 16 turnovers. Even in the game they won against Utah, they had 21 turnovers. I think that is a problem that they're going to have to try to clear up. But overall, I think just they'll have to see how this season goes. But I think Joe McEwen is definitely on the hot seat considering the past couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's tough because Joe McClure is another guy. He's been the face of this program, right? It's his regime. And it's tough when someone's so deeply embedded in a program like he has been to turn the page, like Calvin said, to the next chapter. But it may be time after 3 really rough seasons for Northwestern. And, I'm really hoping this team turns it around. But, like, it's not like they're losing games. It's like it looks the same as last year. And that is really unacceptable after all this new talent. Because, I mean, they should be playing better. The talent on this roster, 100%, should not be losing games this badly. We are at 8:52, so here's where I want to go around the horn because I know we all have some national sports opinions to rattle off. So we'll go around the horn. Everyone can do that, and then we'll do probably one of our games with whatever time we have left. We'll start with Calvin, because I think we could do all three of us together in what I would imagine would be an extended Bears rant. But the Commanders had quite the game. I know Calvin, our resident, or my fellow DC area person, I am not a Commanders fan, so...
Yeah, I don't even know what to think, because there were like 7 different things that happened in the last 3 minutes of that game where I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to have a chance. No, we're not. Yes, we are. No, we're not. Over and over and over. I mean, there was such a great play by Terry McLaurin to have an 86-yard touchdown, and then the extra point got missed that would have tied the game. I mean, during that game, it's just so much stuff. That's barring the kickoff return that the Cowboys had, because for some reason the Commanders decided to purposely kick it to Kavonte Turpin, which is a great idea, right? Like, you think about it, the Commanders just scored. They're now potentially, going to come back in this game, going to have a chance, down by 3. Let's kick it to the best returner in the league, and let's give him a chance. I mean, I know Austin Seibert's not necessarily going to kick it through the end zone every time, but just to give it to him purposely and be like, okay, here's your chance to run 99 yards for a touchdown. Bad decision there. I mean, in general, the team valiantly came back, but the offense has just continued to not look as good as it did in early weeks. So, I mean, I'm just disappointed because it's the Cowboys. Come on. It sucks to lose to the Cowboys when the Cowboys are not playing at their level and they had multiple guys out due to injury. But, I mean, I will say about the team as a whole, I'm not as pessimistic as other fans. I mean, honestly, to be honest, I think a lot of Washington fans are very fair weather, and now they're panicking. Like, the season's
Can't
over.
confirm.
Like, guys, we're 7-5, still last team in the playoffs in the wild card right now. I mean, it's not all over. So, I'm not, down on the team as a whole right now. I just think there are things that need to be fixed.
Thomas Brown is awesome, especially in compared to Shane Waldron. Caleb has his groove, and it's so fun to
The
watch
offense actually,
him.
it feels like they're having fun playing football, which is crazy.
DJ Moore is smiling on the sidelines, and
that didn't happen for the first 6 or 7 weeks of the season.
I thought he was going to request a trade. I thought he was gone, but he's still here. He's hanging around, and Caleb is playing the best football that he's played in the first 11 games of his career, and he's broke the single-season rookie passing record for the Bears. What a great accomplishment.
Incredible.
And I didn't really care much about the loss because I'm so desensitized to Bears losses. But it was a great game from the offense and not the defense. And I hope that Matt Eberflus is fired as a result of his challenges and interesting defensive choices.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to say fired. He can be ceremoniously cut off and give him his night. He's made a lot of money. He's been the coach for a while.
The famous parting ways, right?
Yeah. But I mean, I think the biggest problem is with the Bears.
Oh, where to start?
I mean, there's so many places to start. I mean, it's so great to see the offense looking better, and honestly say that Thomas Brown should be here next year. I don't know if he will be. Knowing the Bears,
We have to give him more time. It's been 2 games.
Yeah, but I
even like it so far.
It's important for Caleb to have consistency. Obviously, Justin Fields had multiple different offensive coaches in his 3 years here, and that definitely impacted how he played. And we saw his potential with the Steelers this year and what he looked like before Russell Wilson came back. And that's another question of what his role will be with them later. But we don't need to talk about that. That's not Bears. We're not Justin Fields fans. We're Bears fans.
Some people are Justin Fields fans, but
which is fair. I mean, I like Justin Fields. I'm rooting for him.
No, me too. Of course.
Yeah. But at the same time, for Matt Eberflus to be a defensive coach, the excuse that has been given all year, essentially, whether it's been actually said or not in press conferences, is the defense is top 5. They're a great defense. So even though the offense is inconsistent, it's because of Waldron. It's because of someone else. It's because Caleb's a rookie. It's because DJ Moore's sad and all these other things, or Keenan Allen's old, or whatever other excuses you want to give. At the end of the day, what is shown by so far in Thomas Brown's offense, and again, you can argue the merits of 2 games and maybe I'm overreacting, but it's looked so much better that it's kind of proving that Waldron was the problem all along. At the same time, for Matt Eberflus to lose, and for them to lose basically because of how poor their defense was, for me, that should be a fireable offense. I mean, if all the other stuff that has happened and all the heartbreaking losses we've had this season and in past seasons, this should be the point in which Matt Eberflus is like, okay, this is enough. However, because it's the McCaskies and because of how the Bears operate, he's going to stay for the rest of the year. So because of that, what I will look for is, can Thomas Brown and Caleb develop that rapport where they can be consistent at this level every game? And that's a question mark considering how strong the rest of their schedule is. Mm-hmm. It's going to be tough, but I think it's an opportunity for Caleb to show that he is that guy. I mean, obviously, after that Commanders loss, on that Hail Mary, all the talk was about how Jane Daniels is much better and the Bears made a mistake. And Jane Daniels is great, and he's looking great for them, even if the Commanders' offense is kind of sputtering. But what I will say is Caleb is showing that he belongs, and I think that was the thing that he hadn't quite done until this game. Yes, he led 2 game-winning drives that they ended up losing because of...
We won't talk about it.
But at the end of the day, he's here to stay. I mean, Bears fans can argue all they want about different things, but Caleb is going to be the quarterback for the next 3 years at least, and hopefully longer.
I would almost certainly say it'll be longer than just 3 years.
But knowing the Bears, it could, whatever. But at the end
God.
Yeah, but we're looking at this optimistically. The defense obviously has injuries, but they need... At the end of the season, defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus should be gone. If you want to keep Thomas Brown, sure. If you want to elevate Thomas Brown to head coach, I wouldn't even be against it because they need an offensive-minded coach. The Bears will not win with a defensive-minded coach, and they won't win with someone who's too out. Like Shane Waldron and Matt Nagy, their biggest problem was, they were being too creative. Be normal. Be like Thomas Brown. Throw short passes. Mix it up. Be
energetic in the locker room.
We don't need. You don't need to be special. You don't need to do trick plays don't win championships. What wins championships is consistency, and so that's why I'm looking for the rest of the year. Even if I hope the Bears lose out, so then Matt Eberflus gets fired for sure.
Yeah, it's with the Chicago Bears, I'm feeling a weird sense of optimism still. It's been a terrible 4-week stretch or 4-game stretch, whatever. I mean, ever since the Calvin's Commanders just shocked us, right? I mean, it has been downhill from there. But I think the Bears are seeing things they want to be seeing. Caleb Williams is not only making good throws and showing that he belongs and putting up good stat lines, which is all great, but I mean, he is playing winning football. They may not be winning games, but what he did today, I mean, his play very nearly won the Bears a game that they were out of. And he brought them into it. I mean, that's what you want from a franchise guy. And the defense, it's concerning. You could put that on Flus. You could put that on maybe a lack of depth that I think we didn't foresee with some of the injuries. And, I mean, Tyreek Stevenson had a catastrophic day.
Again.
Yeah, again. Ever since the Commanders situation, right? I mean, Jordan Addison just picked him apart. I mean, it was bad. But at the end of the day, the offense is looking better. Caleb is looking like the guy. And they're losing games, which lessens the chance that Matt Eberflus will be the coach. And, it's similar to what we were saying about Braun. Eberflus seems like a good guy. Right? He seems like an not as much as Braun. Not as much as Braun. Definitely not as much as Braun.
But he did not help pay for a new stadium. He didn't help. There's no other factors. Matt Eberflus seems like a nice guy, and I'm sure he will get another DC job because he's clearly a capable defensive coordinator.
But he never should have. Honestly, he should not have been offered the head coach job for the Bears. That this shouldn't have happened. There were lots of other candidates. They should have gone offensive minded. He should have been fired after last season when they brought Caleb in. The past is the past. You can't change it. But I am still optimistic about the future. There's so many good pieces. I mean, Keenan had a great day. DJ's looking good. Rome's looking good. Defense, I mean, it's not complete yet, but the pieces are there. The D-line is there. They just have to be healthy, and they have to be healthy, and they have to be deeper. All right, real quick, because technically we're over time, but we're going to go for a little bit. I do want to go with this last segment, because since I teased it on social media. Sports-related gifts. We're just going to do one each. I want to hear your most creative or fun or what you want most this holiday season, because this is likely to be our last Sports Voice before we reach the I guess it'll be our last one of this calendar year. So holiday season, sports related gifts, what are we looking for?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have had this before, but this is something I had early childhood for a while, and then I don't know where it went. It just disappeared. I loved it though. I mean, a mini air hockey table. Not obviously a full-size kind of thing, but one of those little mini ones where you can sit down, just plug it in, play some air hockey. I must have played countless games on that when I was 4 through when I was 8, and still occasionally went back to it until I'm not sure where it went. It must be in the basement somewhere. But I think in that, I would love to just in terms of a gift for the holidays, both give and receive something along those lines, because it's just simple fun in my opinion, where you can just it's just mini air hockey table. You got You can just go back and forth. I mean, it's a pretty simple game. Like, there's not much. You just kind of whack the puck back and forth.
So I love it. I played air hockey yesterday when I was in Ann Arbor, Michigan, visiting my friends. Incredible game.
Yeah,
good idea.
It's awesome, and I remember that fondly as like a childhood thing as well. So both the nostalgia of that and just like in general, just the amount of use you can get out of something so simple is really what intrigues me about it, and I would make it my pick here.
Yeah.
I think I'd have to go with a Bears win.
I gotta second that one.
That
Yep.
just the sentimental value of something that only comes once in a blue moon,
This year.
once a year, once every Christmas. So just being gifted once every Hanukkah, being gifted with that joy of Caleb Williams smiling on national television would just be a wonderful sight for all fans of all teams, I'd say. Because who doesn't like a happy, energetic, fun quarterback being happy after a win?
Love it.
I certainly do. And beyond a Bears win and beyond Matt Eberflus parting ways, which are gifts that I hope they get, I will. Calvin's was a great shot, and I'd also say a mini foosball table is also very fun. Foosball is something that I think is. I don't think it's enough on college campuses. I mean, we have like ping
That's
pong
true.
and pool tables, but I feel like
We need more foosball.
Foosball would be super fun. It's a game. Like,
I agree.
yeah, and I think that would be my literal gift. However, I think my biggest gift that I want, and maybe this isn't for the new year, but I want the Bears need to have a better offensive line. They need to have a better line in general. They need anyone, one person. I just need someone to show me that Ryan Poles cares about the offensive line. And obviously, he's tried all these character guys. He's tried guys. Again, we talk about Matt Eberflus, other people being good guys. The offensive line seems like they're full of really, really great guys with really, really nice families and really great everything about them. However, it seems like across the board, every single one would not even be the third best lineman on any other team in the entire league, which is really concerning. And so what I would say is just give me one. Give me one, Ryan. Ryan Poles will get another year because Kevin Warren wants him there. But his leash is kind of like
Tightening slightly.
It's tightening. I would say a lot at this point. I mean, he chose to keep Matt Eberflus.
I think Poles is still. I think he's made mistakes, but he's done a good job with. I think roster wise, I mean, especially when you talk about defense, I mean, he's made some good acquisitions.
He's made some great acquisitions, and honestly, if the team does not get better next year, I am really happy that he set up the next GM to win. But what I will say is that would be my gift. Just please get someone competent in the line, please.
Well, on that note, an incredible hour and a half long hour and a half long episode of Sports Voice. Calvin was here, Jonah was here, Pierson was here, and it was a great time. We will be posting on social media about future weeks. This is likely the last one of the year. We, of course, hope to be back next week, but I know a lot of people are out of town, and we'll to be determined. But if this is it, a great year of Sports Voice, we'll be back in January. But we do hope to see you at some point before the year ends. So for my co-host Claire, who did have to leave at 8:30, and all of my lovely guests here today, thank you so much to everyone listening. Thank you so much, and we will be back at some point.
Yeah.
Kennedy Hill.